Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And today on State of Current Affairs with host Lillian Cauldwell and Viki Esther Chang from Singapore, we're covering a plethora, I love that word, a plethora of topics with food security, going into AI. There's a lot of that going along. And whatever else Viki chooses to discuss, because after all, she's in Singapore, which has a different mindset than Americans. And one needs to take note of that America has not conquered the world yet, unlike Alexander the Great. And so there are other people who have different opinions and thoughts and feelings that the United States cannot, or should not, is probably a better word, interfere with. I mean, that's what a democracy is all about. And that's what we're taught. And this is a democratic podcast. So without further ado, Viki, take it away.
Hi, Lillian, and this is 9:48 p.m. Singapore time on a Monday evening. This is the 21st of October, 2024. Even before we start, I just want to wish all of the listeners, wherever you are, either in the United States or in Asia, in China, or in Europe, a good 2024 to the end of the year. We are just like barely 2 months to complete the years. A lot of things going to happen in the next 2 months. And I'm just going to say, Lillian, we are at this pivotal time of the world. We're talking about entering into the a new age of humanity through artificial intelligence. And of course, America, it's into the, I think it's into its election days already. People have already started to vote. And we're talking about the wars in Europe and in the Middle East, which is already spreading. And if, ladies and gentlemen, if you do follow the news, China, the premier of China, he has already announced to his military to get ready for war. So we're into the end of 2024 and going to 2025, and I can't even tell you, Lillian, we are just sitting on the knife's edge. Whichever way we're going to go, we're just going to sink in and get ourselves cut. So today I'm going to share 2 articles with yourself, Lillian, and the audience and the listeners. And thank you for last week, the episode on the election of America. Hopefully we can talk about it tomorrow, because we're so into the heat of America and all eyes are on America right now. So today I'm going to talk about the first article. Floods destroy 1.1 million tons of rice in Bangladesh. And we're talking about floods destroying 1.1 million tons of rice in Bangladesh. Floods in Bangladesh have destroyed an estimated 11 million tons, 1.1 million tons of rice, according to data from the Agriculture Ministry, prompting the country to ramp up imports of the staple grain amid soaring food prices. Floods brought on by heavy monsoon rains and torrential upstream rainfall has struck the country in 2 major waves in August and October, claiming at least 75 lives and affecting millions in the eastern and the northern regions of Bangladesh. And I'm going to say this in a big backdrop of not only climate change. We can cut it in so many ways. We can talk about climate change. Weather has become unpredictable. That's why there is floods, and there are floods that cannot be stopped, because you're talking about the forces of nature. Can we stop the wind? We can't stop the wind. Can we stop the rain? We can't stop the rain. Can we stop the hurricanes and the tornadoes that's wiping America? You can't. So we're talking about the forces of Mother Nature there. But today we won't. I'm not going to talk about climate change that is already impacting our world right now. But look at some of these impact that has on us, our agricultural crops. And I would like to particularly talk about this 1.1 million tons of rice in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh and like many countries, they are exporting countries. They are countries that export their food and crops out of the country to feed importing countries like in Singapore, plus many parts of the world. And I think this is important because I want to talk about a country like Bangladesh does export food to Singapore as a food importer, net food importer for the world, from the world. I think one of the things that probably will be of interest to listeners and to viewers from huge countries like in America, food is not a problem because agriculture, you have that in your backyard because you've got land. And you've got land, you've got a garden, you can plant your mushrooms, you can plant your strawberries, etc. Which, of course, this is what I see when I go to Europe. People have gardens. They'll kind of plant their little own um, herbs. However, in a country like Singapore, food has become a very important part of our national security. Now, and it sounds like crazy. How can food be your national security? Now, think about during that pandemic when the world shut and all the ship has stopped and all the planes has stopped. Singapore had to declare that it still has to open up our lanes for food from air and from shipment from treaty countries that we are importing the food from. And these countries wanted to shut because these countries during the pandemic wanted to shut their borders. But because Singapore made an appeal to get their food coming in, otherwise, think about 6 million people. We've got no food on in the shelves, in the supermarkets. We're going to die like within a couple of months, maybe a couple of weeks. So food security is very important, but think about currently a lot of food inequality and food disparity in the world, whereby we've got lots of food. However, the poorest countries do not have food. So you may think that national security-wise, like in Singapore, food is abundant in many countries like in Europe, in America. However, in certain island states like in Singapore, food is of national security. Therefore, we import food from over 100 countries in the world, everywhere. So when a country shuts, the other part of the world can import food. But look at what's happening to Bangladesh. And rice is actually one of the staples for Singaporeans. We live on rice every day, just like in America, burgers every day. Think about if rice is not coming in, it's going to add onto inflation prices. So in this part of the world, we're talking about water security in Singapore, food security, and therefore Singapore has another industry. We call it the food technology. So we are trying to grow agriculture upwards in verticals. That means we have buildings, right? Which is unheard of course, in America or in certain parts of the world. We have buildings designed to actually have aeroponics and hydroponic plants. So aeroponics and hydroponic plants are just like it's just almost like your bookshelves, whereby plants are actually being grown on shelves upwards. So instead of having agriculture grown on land, acres and acres of land, we have plants that is grown on shelves that is on buildings, stories and stories of buildings. That's how we try to overcome national security threats. Because when we have our water cut off, I think in a couple of episodes again, we talked about water being one of our national security issues. If neighboring countries do cut off water, we can't survive for a couple of weeks. Therefore, we use technology to enhance our water source, like using water from air. So we're not going to talk about water. We're talking about food right now. So a lot of countries right now are going into food technology, aeroponics, hydroponics. Hydroponics are what plants that grow on air. Um, and they are grown in pockets of styrofoam boxes, whereby these styrofoam boxes have holes in them, and the plants grow out of the holes. And how do plants grow out of holes? Where you spray chemicals onto the plants, like vitamin A, B, C, D, your zinc, your potassium, your magnesium, onto the plants. The plants absorb the nutrients and water from the sprays. Then they grow, with sunlight. They still grow, and they do not grow on water and on land. So you've got a new kind of technology that's called aeroponics. And of course, aeroponics are important as a food source and as a new kind of food technology for countries or cities that is lacking a food source or importation, and it can control inflation to a certain rate. But however, think about that when you are not um, eating food that is grown naturally from the soil, you may have ramifications. Some people say, hey, there's very little ramifications. And some people think there is because it's grown not organically, but it's grown chemically. There's always two schools of thought, and I hope I can delve in there. But today I'd like to introduce the concept of aeroponics. And of course, we know what is hydroponics. Hydroponics are plants that are grown on water, right? Traditionally, vegetables are grown on soil, but instead of soil, they're now grown on water, on sponge. So you plant the seeds into sponges that is into this troves of water, and the troves of water actually contain a lot of chemicals. Of course, you're talking about chemicals of all your vitamins, your selenium, your magnesium, your manganese, your copper, whatever you get from your food that's on the ground goes into the water, and your plants goes into the water. So that's how certain countries are trying to overcome food security. And the word food security is new to a lot of countries, a lot of people, because the nature of food or the threat of dwindling supply of food supply, it's unheard of in a lot of countries. Because in a lot of countries, they are wasting food because you can't consume them. When the weather is good, you probably have a flourish of agriculture, and therein lies the paradox of food prices. When there is an overgrowth of food or crops, like a vegetable, you can call it, for example, some green vegetables, maybe cabbage, for example. When you've got an overgrowth of cabbage because the weather is good, prices tend to go down because they are called perishables. And if you do not sell at a particular time frame, they will decay and they will be thrown away. So therefore, when there is an overgrowth and overproduction of vegetables, of these perishables, the prices go down. However, when there is less production of these vegetables, the prices go up. So there is always the economics of agriculture. When supply is little, right, prices go up. And what does the farmer do? The farmer thinks that I will produce less, so the price go up, and that's where I can get more revenue. So that's the paradox of agriculture. And this is in economics, of course, but I'm sharing this with listeners and viewers. Sometimes there is manipulation of crop prices by agriculturalists. We cannot think about farmers as in the olden days. The farmers are plowing the land with goats and oxes. They are owned by huge industrialists. They are owned by huge investors. So we want to think about agriculture, no more in those olden days whereby your grandfathers go to the farm, and they try to sell the strawberries into the shops anymore. They are owned by huge industrialists. So agriculture is actually affected by demand and supply, and it can be manipulated by agriculture industrialists. Now think about times like this. Um, Bangladesh, there is 1.1 million tons. We're talking about a ton like the weight of an elephant, right? We're talking about 1.1 million tons of rice being wiped out because of flood. Now think about the price of rice. The price of rice is going to shoot up, and who is going to benefit? They will be the industrialists. So there is lie the paradox of agricultural food because of it being in the nature of the category called perishables. I'm not going to talk about that, but just think about some of these things that come up when you read an article like that about food prices that is actually coming in. Yes, due to the shortage, the price will go up. But due to the shortage, the price will further go up because the industrialists want to make money out of that because they know that you need the food. Think about that. Okay, two aspects of that. Now think about the third thing that I just said, food technology, about food security. I want to introduce a new terminology, which is called the food science. Now we are growing food in laboratories. There's a new kind of food that we are not only growing vegetables in buildings, in the air called aeroponics, or in water called aeroponics. We're growing meat cells in the laboratories. And I hope that I can introduce about this technology that Singapore is invested heavily in, about growing protein in the lab and bringing your meat onto your table, which is already happening already in Singapore. Very expensive because, again, it is in an experimental mode. It's not in mass production, but scientists have successfully grown protein. Now think about that. Protein is a molecule. You can grow it in the lab like a virus, like a bacteria. Definitely they can grow it massively in tanks, and they are already doing that. So we are trying to solve food security issues in many parts of the world by using technology. We've got aeroponics, hydroponics, and now you've got meat protein grown in the labs that is already experimental in the restaurants. And think about some of these dilemma, Lillian. If the food is not declared that it is grown in the lab, well, you can say there are different schools of thought. Of course, there's a debate. Well, some people can say, hey, it's just food, right? I mean, just eat them. They're just protein, right? Don't be so fussy. There's another group of people thinking that, hey, we have not tested it through the generations. We do not know what they are, what kind of impact it will have on our health and of our offsprings. And the third debate, of course, is disclosure. Do you want this to be disclosed, like the meat that goes onto your plate? It looks exactly, the beef patty will look exactly like the real beef patty that you're going to consume off in McDonald's. Think about McDonald's one day. It's going to grow all its protein in the lab because it's easier. It is in the kitchen. You don't have to solve the logistics. It's cheaper, and it can grow, and it goes onto your burger, and it just serves onto you. And what about regulation and disclosure, transparency? So again, a lot of consumer education. We're just scraping off state of our world. We are actually just on the surface of all these things that we are changing in 2024. Lillian, we talked about AI, we talked about climate change, we are really in this era that things are really thrown to us without a lot of us having a say in it, having a lot of debates and conversations about it. So Lillian, again, food that comes up from the news, that things that goes through my mind when we talk about food security, debates, and transparency, of course, prices. impact and decisions and disclosures. So that's my first article, Lillian. Before I go into the second article today, any thoughts on that, Lillian?
Well, the United States has been dealing with food access for a while now.
Food
And it's
access.
something that really
Bring it
bothers me.
here.
Well, back 20 years
Logistics.
ago, or
Yeah.
even further, when the cows were producing too much milk, the farmers were paid by the U.S. government to dump the milk into the ground.
Yes. Yes.
Or if they have food, they would take the food, and a lot of this food went to the people who were very poor, but they did not know how to use this food, so they would dump it in the dumps. Just get rid of it, not use it at all. The U.S. government also pays the farmers to grow crops, and the farmers let them rot in the fields. And to me, that's just disgusting. There are so many homeless and really poor people in this country and they're abandoned orchards that farmers have put up, apples, peaches, oranges, whatever, wherever
I'm
you
gonna
are.
move there.
And they just rot on the tree limbs. And I think that's
Wow.
disgusting. I mean,
Yeah.
in a country that is so plenty, you would think that they would establish a way of getting this food picked, washed, and then allowed for people who really need it to come and get it. You would think. I remember there was my dentist who was too old or couldn't be bothered, and she had pear trees. And we
Yeah.
used to ask permission, go over and pick all the pears. And then I think the biggest waste is deer, which grow like bunny rabbits at a phenomenal rate. And yet
Wow.
there's roadkill all over the road from cars smashing into these animals. They could still be
Wow.
used for meat. And I just think it's disgusting that we as humans have this attitude that we have so much, therefore it's okay for us to waste it because there won't be a rainy day when we need it. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's ridiculous. You're
Can
always
I
going
just,
to need
yeah.
food, and to
Can I
just
can I
waste.
just interject? Yeah, Lillian, can I just interject? When I hear about that, now think about not only Singapore, that because we have a lack of land, right? This is an island, and every inch of the land is actually built and developed for human to live. Think about like what you say about the poor who need it, and the issue is distribution and inequality. Until we solve this through technology and through discussion, we are really skewed in terms of the growth of the world, because we're talking about state of current affairs right now, Lillian. We're
Oh,
talking about
absolutely.
access. We're talking about access.
We're
Access
talking
as
about
in,
access, and then you're talking about lack of resources. People talk, well,
yes, and
you
I'm
can
also
always
talking
grow
about,
things in water. Well, fresh water is going to become a scarcity, and we
it
don't
is
have.
already a
It
scarcity.
already is for very many countries. And the other thing is that the technology for turning salt water into fresh water is
Yeah.
prohibited. So they're not the poor countries or the ones that are sort of in between the middle class countries, I
Yeah.
guess, are also going to have this problem. And it's only the wealthy people, not
Yeah.
the citizens, but the cream of the crop, as they want to say, a few, so that the few have and the rest starve. And there's something
Yes.
very inherently wrong with that type of philosophy. It's called greed
Yeah. Yeah.
and corruption. That's basically what it is, or man's appetite. And that there's
Yeah.
some people who are better than others. And this has been going on since the days of the Bible.
Yeah. And you know what, Lillian? Because you say this, I want to interject. Not just greed and corruption, really lazy and bad policies, lazy politicians, and bad policies, because a lot of things you have to look at it from the macro perspective in terms of transporting uh, excess, as in what you say, a lot, to those who is deficient. And of course, the word in on top of this is access. ACCESS. Access to all this over sufficient oversupply of assets we're talking about. And that's why I think we as the Main Street people, Lillian, yourself and myself, we want to continuously voice out the state of current affairs, the state of imbalance, the state of inequality in the world from US to Singapore to the other parts of the world whereby there is no access, ACCESS, to the EXESS, the excess. So, I think it is our responsibility as podcasters to bring out the state of current affairs. Now, why is the world growing in a skewed way? Because we're not poor. I mean, the world has got excess of wealth. That's what I'm trying to get at. Why is the current state of the world skewed in such a way? A lot of billions and billions and billions of dollars are going into technology, which is good, of course. We're going to not turn back from washing machines and the fridge and air fryers. We need that kind of technology. But I think there is also the light that we need to shine on, that there must be some form of shining on light of deficiencies in certain parts of the world where there is demand and the supply is not met, like what you say. There's an oversupply in the US, but there isn't any supply in this part of the world. And we are like dying of starvation of having agriculture here. So, Lillian, that's why our conversation is so important. But because, if you don't mind, let me quickly go to the second article, again on food. And this article, Lillian, I'd like to share very quickly with the listeners and the audience is Meta. Meta, the mother company of Facebook. Meta reportedly fires. Okay, and this news is from Fortune, and Fortune, one of the biggest magazines, biggest news in the world, news source in the world. Meta reportedly fires the staffer on $400,000 a year for spending $25 meal on toothpaste and tea instead on food. Again, Meta reportedly fires staffer on $400,000 a year for spending $25 meal credit on toothpaste and tea instead of food. Now let me interpret this again. It says that a staff, right, an employee that is on salary of $400,000 uses a food credit of $25 instead of on food and on meals and lunch. He uses it to buy toothpaste, and he's fired. And of course, this goes on to the big spectrum if people follow the news of technology companies. Meta, again, the news that comes up after that, they have actually retrenched workers, employees across numerous departments. And likewise, Microsoft also retrenched workers across different departments if you look at the news that follows up. Lillian, again, the news is on food, but I want to share with you how I look at it as someone who's commenting on it, someone who's in the Main Street. Firstly, we talked about the power of the media, Lillian. We talked about people who owns the media. I also want to talk about people who are pushing out news from where they are, right? We've got the news today, for example, Meta saying that they're going to fire this employee for abusing the food credit. And a few days later, Meta says they're going to retrench workers across the board. Now, that's just a precursor, or that's just an excuse for them to be firing workers. So I want to really say that, these technology companies are really manipulating the media. And we must not buy into that kind of news, number one. Number two, we must read news in an overall spectrum and not just pick a piece of news and then just read on it. It's so dangerous because you've got the left, you've got the right, you've got the centrist who wants to push out news to your eyeballs. And we're now talking about companies, corporations, or governments who just want to push out news to you because they can do so and they want to make use of this engine to their own advantage because they know the news cycle and how people consume news and how they can make you believe in certain things. So I just want to talk about this a source about Meta firing someone who actually abuses the food credit because they say that there's a lot of news that came out about that another company, another bank, right, that I think is Citibank. I need to recheck on that. They actually fired workers across the board because they abused a certain kind of credit, again on food, lunch or overtime dinner. I think the reason is because there is an imbalance of power. Again, so much issues that come up from the news because corporations can do that.
Yeah.
Corporations want to do that, right? Because
Right.
human employees, thank you, um, is the first cost cutting measure and is the easiest cost cutting measure to make any company profitable because they can. It is a lazy way for the company to become profitable or to increase their profits. And we're talking about companies that are already in the blue, they're already in the black. They're already making billions and billions of dollars for their shareholders, but they want to do it because they can and because we allow them to.
Yeah.
We're talking about banks, we're talking about tech companies. We're talking about a whole host of companies. They are huge because there is an imbalance of power. And because the other thing I want to say again, I hope I can write about this, because it is harder to redesign a work process, a manufacturing process, a business process, an internal process to redesign a process to make it profitable because there are many ways of making a company profitable. For example, increasing market share, edging your competitor, etc., etc. There's so many forces out there, but because we make it so easy for them to cut us out, they cut us out. And I hope that in times to come, Lillian, I want to talk about imbalance of power in terms of an employee who comes into a company who signs an employment contract. An employment contract is usually signed because the company thinks they have the power to say whatever they want, to use whatever they want, so that they can use you. And when they want you to go, they want you to go. So, I'm just going to talk about that in the future in balance of power in many, many ways. But today, again, the topic about Meta, that fired an employee that has a yearly salary of 400,000 just based on one meal credit, and that's happening across industries. And of course, in the backdrop of companies now are using technology, AI, whatever out there to make their company easier, to be more productive, to be more competitive, because they have access to technology and they are able to get rid of human productivity. So over to you, Lillian. A lot of issues that comes up even with one article. So I urge viewers, listeners, the audience to really get ourselves to bring back the power to the main street. Again, Lillian, a show like this is so important, so powerful because we are trying to educate the main street that even though you are just a mother, even though you're a teacher, you're a janitor, you're just someone who's tuning into the show, you will wake up to the power you have and the voice that you have through understanding, and the consumer education or the employee education that we are hopefully trying to present to you from State of Current Affairs, from America to Singapore. Lillian, over to you. Thank you.
I think it's important that people really hear the truth. And truth is one of those words that you can stretch it out of proportion. And yet, in certain parts of the truth, they do really hear it. And then in other parts, this truth has been stretched out of shape. And people have got to learn how to distinguish between what they're really truly hearing is the absolute truth or a form of truth that the people in charge have decided it's the only way
Yes.
they can explain it to the populace because they're too stupid to figure it out for themselves.
Yes.
And I mean, when they have elections, whether it's presidential or for state governor or even for the mayor or for local positions, the newscasters get on the TV or the radio and they start explaining to you not the
Yes.
whole truth, but their version of the truth, their perspective,
Yes.
their opinion, their agenda of what they believe people want to hear. So, therefore, you're really not hearing what's actually happening, but you're getting a version of what is actually happening. And I suggest to people that they listen with two ears. One, that's what the announcer is saying. And then, as they say, read between the lines. Because one of the potential candidates for presidents is already promising the oil and gas companies that he does not believe in global warming. And so he's going to go back to oil and gas for fuel and power. And that's pretty much writing the doom. You don't have to worry about Putin. You don't have to worry about the North Korean dictator because this type of policy will kill us a lot faster and do a lot more damage in a lot more ways. Yeah, the atomic bomb can wipe out half a country. I understand that. But if you start going back to fossil fuels, you are definitely destroy the earth more effectively, whether it's from uranium that turns everything into a wasteland, or oil and gas that turns everything into a wasteland. Why do you think they stopped fracking? Fracking, because they understood finally if they did that, the chances were that you would get more problems with your earth, like earthquakes
The water. Oh,
and
yeah.
water, because the oil leaks into the water. Therefore, you can't drink it, can you now? And they have already discovered that there's more water deep within the earth than the surface groundwater that has already been extinguished. So think about that. If you knew that there was a whole ocean full of fresh water beneath your feet, I'm not saying they should do that, but it makes a lot more sense to drill for the fresh water than it is for the oil and the subsequent gas and plastic industry. So, what does this tell you? It tells you that human nature hasn't changed. They're still greedy for profits, for what they can bring into their investment owners, the board of directors, right, shareholders, which in the short run, yeah, it works out real well. But for the long run, it's destroying your country. It's
Yeah.
destroying the planet.
And I totally subscribe to that because water is direct. You need water to survive the next day. If you
Yeah,
don't
and you
drink
can't
water
go
for two
without it.
days, you die.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
and,
need
and
it
think
in three
about think
days.
about the underground water that is going to be polluted and it's going to be for forever.
Yep.
Because once you've got the action and your consequence is forever, and we're talking about forever, that you can't undo that action, you better think about the first action in the first place. Right. So I
Yeah.
totally describe, I so totally subscribe to that. And you're right, because policies affect people.
Yeah.
Policies
Absolutely.
affect your life because policies affect your health, your life, your children, and the earth. And you can't undo a lot of things. You can't undo at all. So, I totally subscribe to that. And I hope that we can talk about something so serious, Lillian. back on the environmental impact about pollution and pollution impacting people's health and people's lives, because they do, and we don't see it because they're on a molecular level.
Exactly.
Lillian.
And I think people don't want to acknowledge it. I mean, when the Europeans came over from Europe, those who were displeased what was going on in their country, they came to America because it was a new country. It was unsoiled.
Yeah,
It
wow.
hadn't been blemished. And their attitude, and
Unblemished.
that attitude still exists. This belongs to me. I can do whatever I
Mm,
want because there won't be any repercussions. I won't have to pay a
mm,
price for it. Well, I guess
mm,
what, people, you're paying a price for it
mm,
right now. Even the
mm,
Sahara Desert started out as a
mm,
green oasis. Even
mm,
Antarctica started out as a green oasis. So,
mm.
and look at them now. I mean, it seems
Totally
like
polluted. Yeah.
we can't stand to have the goose that lays the golden egg. We always have to destroy it. We always have to control it. We always have to dictate to it, subject it. I mean, this is behavior of our humanity, and we haven't bothered to change it because it's been working so well for the last
Yeah.
millennia. Why change it
Yeah.
now? But the
And
problem
yeah.
is that, do we have the right to keep on
Or do we have,
destroying?
and do we have the wisdom
And well,
to we
that's, yeah.
to
But do we
manage
have
it?
the
Yeah.
right to go into space
Yeah.
and destroy it? Do we have the right to go into the sea, because it's not been explored thoroughly, and destroy it? And they're finding things down there, and they're finding things out in space they didn't know about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, because there's global warming. They're now finding people who have hiked in Everest and some of the other mountain ranges that they had to go and see, and now they're finding bodies from 100 years ago, or what's left
Mm,
of them. So
mm,
just because it's there doesn't mean A, you have to claim it, B, that you have to destroy it, and C,
mm,
decide to destroy other places because you've already destroyed your native habitat. So let's go somewhere else and start all over again. I mean, that
mm.
doesn't give you the right to do that. And I'm always amazed that men, and women seem to have it too, but men more. I don't know if there's an extra gene for
No, but
absolute
I do
power.
understand why men more, because women by nature, by genetics, you are the person who takes care of the family, right?
Yeah, but
Who
you don't
takes
want
care
to.
of.
You don't want to go that route. Otherwise, you'll be in chains with the
Oh,
family.
really?
I mean, women. I mean,
I
if you
know.
take a look at the
Yeah,
verbiage, what
yeah,
they say about slaves, they apply to
yeah.
women. Well, their brain isn't fully formed. Their constitution won't be able to handle it. They're really a delicate matter. I mean, you take a look at the people who subjected other people, other
Mm,
natives. They use the same vocabulary, the same
mm,
terminology as the way they used to describe women, which
mm.
is, to me, fascinating, because men have not evolved. If anything, they seem to be going backward in their thinking.
Backwards. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you
So Lillian,
really
yeah,
need to delve deeper
yeah.
than you have delved before, because if you don't, you leave yourself wide open for other people to come in and take over. One of
Yeah.
the things I find fascinating is watching the cooking shows where they're competing, or the sewing
Mm,
shows where they're competing to see how, and you listen to the language and
mm,
their behavior. And it's on a
mm,
smaller scale than the countries and the nations that are at war with. The same
mm,
jealousies, the same
mm.
anger. I'm going to throw
I
you
see.
under the bus because I will protect myself first. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, it doesn't change, folks. It's the same attitude and the same
It's kind
mannerism.
of kind of reflection.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well. I find it fascinating. I mean, these people could be kings, queens, dictators, rulers, despots. They act the same way. And that is truly frightening.
Yeah. So, thank you, Lillian, for the sharing these two news articles. I hope that um, the listeners, audience can chew on them, and definitely I will come back tomorrow and bring two other current affairs that reflect the state of our current affairs, the state of our world. With the listeners and the audience, and so that they really can sit up, hopefully with a different perspective, because the way I brought it up, they can think and delve deeper. Thank you so much, Lillian.
You're very much welcome. Thank you all very much for listening. If you want to see this or hear this episode all over again, please go over to the website, https:// passionateworldtalkradio.com. Scroll down to State of Current Affairs, click on it, click on the Google link. It takes you right into the belly of the beast, YouTube, and you have an opportunity to not only revisit State of Current Affairs, but you also have an opportunity to watch all the other episodes from different podcasts that will enlighten, entertain, and yes, educate you, because we are known as the resource of the internet. But you can always call directly to youtube.com/ at Passionate World Radio, or you can go over to linkedin.com/ Lillian Cauldwell, or facebook.com/ Passionate World Radio. We're on the first 25 pages of Google. You really cannot miss us. Very easy. And we're on about 25 to 30 additional social media outlets: Tumblr, Instagram, TikTok. So come and pay us a visit. And if you would like to appear on the show or express your opinion, either text us at 484-364-1032 or write us an email with your name and your email and a good time to get back with you. And that is pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. And the program, of course, is brought to you by three sponsors. The first one is with Viki Esther Chang, who runs a publishing company, and she will help you write your memoirs and get them out. You don't have to be a king to leave your diary behind. You have a lot of knowledge that they themselves don't possess for various and sundry reasons. So contact us at 484-364-1032 with the following information: name, email address. If you live in the States, I can give you a call, 484-364-1032. Also, from https:// education.passionateworldtalkradio.com/masterclass, the obstacles of podcasting. So it's a 2-month course, 1 hour, 5 days a week. Sign up, bring a friend. For the price of 2, you only have to pay for the price of 1. And also, speaking of the devil, artificial intelligence, Ruby, RUBI.ai. Go over to http:// with Lillian, LILLIAN.com, and see what Mark Cuban is talking to the world about. It's a no-brainer, and anyone, and I mean anyone, can use it. I mean, they know coming out of the womb how to use cell phones. Give them another 5 years, and they'll all know coming out of the womb how to use AI. Thank you very much for joining us today. Don't forget, tomorrow, 9:30, same time, same station, State of Current Affairs with Viki Esther Chang and Lillian Cauldwell. Thank you.